Good morning, my Live, Build, Change family. Kerry Green here again for the Morning Mindset, and I am here to help you live your faith in an authentic, powerful way. You see, faith is not just about hoping in something. It's not just about wishing that something in your life were different. It's about believing what God has said about who He is and who you are in His family, and believing it enough that you act differently as a result. I mean, that's about as plainly as I can put it. You believe something and you act on it. That is faith. And faith in God is believing who He is, what He says, and that it is absolutely true. And that if you live it out, you will reap the benefits that come from enacting it in your life. In the last few episodes of the Morning Mindset, we've been looking at the letter to the Colossians that the Apostle Paul wrote, and we're in chapter number 3. And Paul has told us to put to death whatever is earthly in us. And his basis for telling us to do that is that we are no longer earthly citizens. We now have an identity that is heavenly, and our very life is hidden, securely tucked away with Christ in God. We are forever a part of God's family. And that has changed everything. That's our identity now, and we are to live out of that identity. And he says a very common sense result of that is that we are to put to death what is earthly. In yesterday's edition of the Morning Mindset, we talked about some of those things. Paul gave us a little list, and here's the list again: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness. Now, please don't hear those lists as a list of don'ts, even though they are things we are to put to death. But what I mean is, it's not this legalistic list that you have to make for yourself and ensure that you're checking off every day. That's not the motivation behind this. This is not about you making yourself better. This is about you embracing who you are, who you really are in Jesus Christ, who your faith in Him has made you to be. And you are a person who does not engage in these kinds of things. You don't give in to sexual immorality or impurity. You're not ruled by your passions. You don't live according to evil desires and covetousness. In fact, Paul says in verse 7, right down the page, in these you too once walked when you were living in them. So he's saying that's who you were before you placed your faith in Christ. That you had every reason to live that way at that time. But that's not who you are now. Something in you has changed, and that is your very identity. God has changed it for you. He's now given you the life of Christ. And so Paul goes on and he says, but now you must put them all away. And he's going to give us another list: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Now, here's just an example. I've heard Christians talk recently about obscenities in foul language, and they seem to be trying to justify their use of it by saying, well, you know, sometimes it's just the right word. It just fits. It's what expresses the meaning or the intent of the moment the best. And I somewhat understand where they're coming from, but look at Paul's argument here. His argument is that obscene talk coming out of your mouth as a believer in Christ is not fitting for you, because that's not who you are. Your identity has changed. Your life is now hidden with Christ in God. And so imagine for a moment, if your life is in God Himself, would obscene talk flow out of God? There's just no way I can even comprehend that being the case. And that's just one example Paul gives here. He talks about anger being expressed wrongly, about wrath, about malice toward people, about slander. Those are things that do not flow out of God Himself. And our life is hidden with God right now. It's not a pie in the sky when you die thing where you're going to get that in heaven. It's true now. And we're going to talk about it more on tomorrow's Mindset edition of the Live, Build, Change podcast.